Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, boys and girls, it's the short stuff that can pack a hell of a wallop. And you know what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening. And if you're listening, that means you can subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, gives you a 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere, places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on the social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, and who knows where else. Tumblr, I don't even know anymore. But we're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? We love to watch it and write about it and talk about it. We love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that kindness and pay us a visit. On today's episode, we look at a really powerful piece of short filmmaking, which is playing as a part of the Canadian Film Festival, which is going on at the Scotiabank Theatre in downtown Toronto, right here, right now, today. So go check it out if you want to. It's called Erase and Rewind, from filmmaker Lauren Grant, who has a fantastic track record of producing film, but also has delved into short film as well. And it is, well, it's really interesting because it looks at sort of the conversation around consent and the lasting impact of sexual assault when it happens, and it's adapted from a gripping short story of the same name by author Meghan Bell. And it's using like almost sci-fi tropes and some weird time travel tropes to really put us into the headspace of how survivors sit with the trauma and sort of their reaction therein. And it's just, it's a powerful piece of short filmmaking. And I mean, if you get a chance, either at the festival today or somewhere down the line, check it out. It is a really, really powerful piece of cinema. But before we do that, check out our conversation with writer director Lauren Grant as we dive into sort of the minutia of making a film and doing it and sort of exploring the art form. We had a great talk, but like I said, it's at the Canadian Film Fest having its world premiere. It's called Erase and Rewind. I'm sure you'll be able to catch up with it either there today. I think they're screening it at 2:30 as part of one of the shorts packages, but also I'm sure you'll be able to find it at some point. It's really, really a great piece of cinema. Do that, but first enjoy our talk with Lauren Grant because, as always, it's a pretty darn good one. All right, well, just to kick it off officially, I mean, obviously, just first off, thank you so very much for the time today. I really appreciate it. And I mean, congrats on the short. I thought it was really great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Now, I mean, I guess my first question is, because you did adapt this from a short story, like what made you want to sort of tell the story? Because, I mean, as I was going through everything that you've done, you've got sort of a very noted career producing a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff that I've done interviews for. But I mean, what made you sort of have the storytelling itch and want to make this short in the director's chair?
Yeah, it definitely started for me at the end of 2019. I produced 3 movies that year. And I went to film school, I went to UBC, and I just sort of had this feeling of like, suddenly be like, oh, I have things I want to say.
Yeah.
And I'm very picky about what I produce. And obviously it's all sort of in the wheelhouse of the kind of things I've been directing. And that's when I wrote my first short. And while making that film, I had producer meetings with Ontario Creates event from Page to Screen, where producers in Ontario meet book publishers. And I met Book Hug Press, and they told me about this collection of short stories, specifically the title short, Erase and Rewind. And I was like, that has to be a film. So it grabbed me. It spoke to conversations I've had, privately with friends for years. And it just sort of felt like the kind of thing we're still not seeing enough of, on screen. Like, what is this experience? And why do we not talk about it?
Well, and I mean, again, I think the thing that really stood out for me was it wasn't necessarily about the trauma or the lead up to, it was about the aftermath and sort of the processing therein. And I love that it gets framed around almost a bit of a science fiction-y kind of thing. And I mean, that was such a fascinating conceit to me. And just even the simple sort of notion of you didn't have to shoehorn in any effects and just have it sort of rewind. I thought that was brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, we did a lot of tests actually ahead of shooting because things like lifting up your teacup looks the same both directions versus
Right.
walking. We really were like, how do we tell the story where it's clear visually to people what's happening? Yeah, for me, what grabbed me about the story, the short story, which is a similar structure, is it's the moment of self-protection.
Yeah.
It's like the story of telling yourself of like, I know as a society we wish like people would come forward and you tell people so no one else is harmed by this person. But like we know what happens. We know that court case. We know those allegations. We know how it does. The numbers are terrible for victims. And so I really like that it was about this self-protection, but this decision of by rewinding the relationship, she has moments of like realizing she couldn't have seen it coming. But I think she starts that she could have seen it coming. And she gets to the place of like, he was charming. He is nice. Like, I did nothing wrong. And I think when we get to the end, I hope that's what people take away. It's like, she did nothing wrong. Didn't matter. She's wearing a short skirt. Didn't matter that she was drinking. Those were very purposeful things put in the design of like, she's going to do all the things we're told you're not supposed to, the bad, quote unquote bad victim. And she did nothing wrong.
No, and I mean that's such a good thing to put out there. And I mean you're absolutely right. And I mean it the visual language of it all struck me because I mean again it's one of those things where as much as you can tell a story through dialogue, you can tell it through the visuals and how you shoot it. And I mean I'm curious, like how important was it for you to really give it this distinct visual language? I mean, particularly as she's going back, I mean, in the club, sort of in the aftermath, sort of in even in the classroom. There's a the way you shot it definitely gives it to a certain tone.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's the goal. So, you're my first conversation about the film, so it's a
Oh,
little like
sweet. Okay, there we go.
I'm a little like, okay. I just rewatched it before getting on. It was really important to me. My first film is personal. It's about miscarriage. I would say cinematography, like I think it's really beautiful, but I think it's simpler. And so that was something that excited me about this story. Like I sort of optioned the short story and then was like, how am I gonna do this? Like that came second. I just felt like the story was so important. But yeah, we talked a lot. Gabriella Osio Vanden, my cinematographer, my editor, Katie Chipperfield, but also with Bryn, my lead. We talked about her sort of always being on this journey of the two timelines
Mm,
versus Nick is like, he is just what we see is he's living it in the forward time. He has no sense of what's coming yet. But for her, she has to play every scene of like, I'm rewinding, but I'm watching myself redo the things I did until the moment where she sort of questions her friend. That's where she sort of is like changes her timeline of like questioning the thing. So it was really the visual style was really important to me, and I wanted it to feel, you know, to have those dichotomy of threat. Like she starts really dressed up, which is the end of the story, and she gets progressively less dressed up, which I think when I talk to the costume designer, it works in both timelines. Like, you're going to university and you're wearing your sweatshirt,
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever. But also when you're, a survivor of this, that feeling of wardrobe being protection and like more layers being added and added. And so we really, all departments, we talked about how does the story work forward and how does it work, how you're going to see it, which is in reverse.
For sure. For
We
sure.
called it a math problem. Every day we were like, oh, so yeah.
No, I mean, I've got to ask though, how did you find Bryn? Because I mean, she's absolutely fantastic in this. And because I mean, again, it's not about necessarily playing the victim. It's about sort of even just with sort of facial expressions, sort of decompressing and like sort of understanding what has happened. Like you can see the reasoning going on as she goes back through time.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing, amazing. So Sarah Kay and Jenny Lewis were casting directors, and we got like quite a few auditions in. And to be honest, hers, I just knew like right away. I saw hers. I texted my producing partner and was like, "It's her. Like, watch everybody, but it's her." And I think what it was is in the original script, when she looks to camera, there was more asides. There was more
Right.
actually dialogue to camera. So in the audition, I found she played it so grounded. Like as you say, it's kind of this like sci-fi trope around this story, but she played it just as if, she's talking to a friend. There was no big embellishment of it. It was sort of like this fact of the matter of like, oh, he was nice, he was charming, and I just found she brought such a grounded, just beautiful performance in her first audition. Like it was for me 100% her from the first read I saw of hers. And I would say it's probably like her theater background, it's like that idea of like you're having a dialogue with the audience as well as your character, which is not obviously something that happens in film all the time. So I
Right.
think that, yeah.
No, I mean you could tell that just she was letting her entire body sort of tell the performance as opposed to just focusing on the close up or focusing on the dialogue. It was really fascinating to watch, and I mean she does a fantastic job in this. And I mean, just to dovetail into something else, I mean, I'm kind of curious. I mean, this feels like a loaded question, but it's one I have to ask. Like, are you a producer who sort of had the issue to direct, or did you always want to direct and kind of fell into producing? It's like the old chicken and the egg question.
I really did choose producing. I think it's a totally fair question, but it's funny because I feel like early in my career, people are like, "Oh, you're like producing because you're not directing yet," and I was like, "No, no, I don't know if I want to." Um, in university, the structure of my really small UBC is huge, but it's a really small film program. Was if you're everybody wrote a script. There's
Mm.
50 of us in the class. Five were chosen, and if you were chosen, you directed the script you wrote. But then the other key roles were if you were the cinematographer, you did post sound, but if you were the editor, which is what I wanted to do, you were the producer. So that's how I started producing in this very weird structure. Um, and I think also I've had this conversation because I have a lot of friends who are sort of have careers and are turning to directing lately. And I think it's like I didn't feel like my ideas or stories had value yet. Like I think it's taken me time to be like, oh, I have something to say and I probably could make it. I could figure this out. I've been on tons of sets. I supported lots of first time directors. And I sort of got to that point, as I said, really was in 2019 where I'm like, I'm just gonna write a script. I probably won't make it. And then it was like, well, maybe I'll make it. So it grew out of that. It grew out of a desire for honestly like a new challenge and sort of a new excitement of what I wanted to do. And I'm still producing.
Well, no, but I mean, there's obviously creative payoff in producing as well. But I mean, it's one of those things where I mean, I'm curious because, people throw around the word sort of producer as sort of like a vague term. I mean, do are the jobs all that much different really when you boil it down? Because I mean, like as a producer, you still have to be sort of cognizant of what's going on this on the camera. You've got to be cognizant of the script and the scenes and everything else, but you also have to deal with logistical stuff as well.
Yeah, do you mean like from directing to producing?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think it's funny. Like when my first short, my producing partner, she was like, "Oh, like you're definitely quite easy to work with because you understand like there's the machine behind you." And I think one of the biggest things is I understand how important um the atmosphere on set is created from the director.
Right.
As a producer, I can be like, yay, you did a good job, and tell departments they did a good job. And they obviously want to hear that from me, but there is something when it comes from the director. So I really approach directing of like, it's a team sport. Like filmmaking is a team sport.
Totally. Yeah, my God, yeah.
And I think directing is like you're taking the ideas and you're honing it and you have to know your story. So I do think there's a lot of overlap. I've done a lot of like it's producing, but it's like creative producing. Like there's ideas in, lots of my movies that I produced that were like me pitching an idea while we were trying to solve like a script problem that probably was related to budget. And so, yeah, I think I can bring that to directing because it's like there's so much overlap. Like, how do you tell the story you want with the parameters you have and not get bogged down by like, I wish I could have more. Like, this is what you have. Can you tell your story and what's the heart of the story and can you tell it with what is available?
End of the day, is there a preference? Because I mean, obviously, having experience in producing, you're not necessarily coming at it as just sort of the enigmatic artist who wants what they want, and this is how I have to tell my story. There is sort of that other brain side of the brain willing to sort of understand the workarounds.
Yeah, it's I talked to a couple directors from who had been producers before, and I was like, what was it like? Like, could you turn off that side of your brain, that big picture? Um, I would say it's totally possible. I still prep like a producer director. Like for me, I'm still thinking and I write a little bit with like that in mind. The feature I'm writing is told over multiple seasons. As a producer, I know that's hard, but I also know how we can do it. And so I think I can do both, but when you're on set at monitor, I find it really easy to focus, honestly, and it's wonderful, but it's so I think we forget how exhausting intense focus is, you know. So at the end of the day, as I'm prepping for the next day and like reviewing my shot lists and everything, it's like you're tired. But I also just know how much prep is important. I've been on set with a huge range of directors, and I feel like the benefit to coming to producing from or directing from producing is I get to see how other people work and I can choose the things that I thought work well or work well with how I talk and communicate versus lots of directors don't have the opportunity to see other people work. And it's just like such a great way to learn, you know?
For
So I
sure.
think
Totally.
directors are great directors often because they've had the good and they've had the bad and they know what they want to bring to their sets.
Can you, and I mean, I'll admit I'm a little more curious on your answering this from a producer side of things, but can you talk to me a little bit about the importance of short filmmaking? Because I mean, obviously, it's not necessarily a quote unquote money making affair. But again, it's one of those things, especially with festivals like the one you're playing coming up and all that. It's an avenue to sort of get seen and get explored and sort of create opportunity for yourself. Can you sort of enlighten sort of us on just the need for short film? Because again, people on the outside looking in think of it as just a festival thing, but now with the streamers and everything else and CBC Jam, it seems like there's more options out there for short form storytelling.
Yeah, I think as a producer, I think it's so important. When I'm approached as from with a director with a project for a feature they want to make, I want to know what they've made before. Partly because I want to see like, and it doesn't have to be always in line, although most certainly it's helpful when it's like my shorts and my producing work. There's like a lot of obviously overlap in the kind of stories that I tell, which makes it a little, I think, clearer for people to know what kind of like director I will be. And I think it also makes it clear for people when they pitch me as a producer, like the misogynistic horror film is not for me. Please don't send it to me. And I think we got there. I think I finally have stopped those from coming. But short films are so important. Wet Bum is a really great example of the film I
Oh,
produced.
totally. Yeah.
Her short film is Clear Blue is stunning. She won a student Emmy. Like we were able to go to people and say, yeah, it was a drama. Dramas are always hard to finance. I love dramas, but they're hard to finance. And it was like, I don't like the word calling card because I don't think you should make a short film just so it's a calling card, but it was like, look at this vision, look at this style, look at this tone, look at the way she approached her cinematography and her directing, acting. And it was just really clear. It made people comfortable, it made funders comfortable. So I think in that way, short film is so important. You get to try things, like you get to develop your voice. As you said, one of the reasons I got excited to try to tell this story was because it was stylistically different. I wanted to try something different. And so I think shorts are so, so important. And there are homes for them. It's hard, but there's home for them. Just there's a lot of, sweat equity, obviously, to get them out in the world.
Well, totally. My God. But I mean, I love that you brought up the sort of the misogynistic horror film because I mean, the retreat is probably sort of the exact 180 of that. So I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up. But I mean, with the stuff that you've worked on, like Rag Girls and Sugar Daddy, and so much great sort of female driven cinema. I mean, that feels weird to say because it's just good cinema, but at the end of the day, like, what are you kind of hoping for going forward? Not only as a producer, but as a director as well. Because I mean, again, as much as it's important to share such a diverse range of stories, we want to be able to get to a point where we're dropping sort of the feminist label or the this label and just make it good fucking cinema, good stories.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And obviously, it's funny, I came to being able to say, my films are female centric in front and behind the camera. Like,
For
I've
sure.
been on the sets where I'm like one of the few women in my younger career. And it's like, I just am not interested in that space. This is not to say I want a space of only women. I would like actually to have like all genders at the table. I would actually like a diversity of voices to like on my sets and telling the stories. I think it matters. We all bring something different. Um, I also would love us to not have to like, I'm a big fan of romance novels. Like I love Carly Fortune, Toronto author Carly
Right.
Fortune, and she talks about this a lot, where it's like, why is it diminished? Why do we view it as lesser?
That's,
Like
yeah.
good storytelling is good storytelling. And um I think it's important. We're not there yet. Obviously, gender parity stuff, the numbers are coming out, and it's just there's lots of work to do. And I think we have to keep pushing it because it's not there yet. But it makes me happy when I see, you know, the range of things like the farewell to Barbie,
Totally. Yeah.
let's see, because like all the stories are important, and I think there's room for fresh stories, like it's a challenging time in the industry. Theaters are really full of tentpole blockbusters. It's hard to find space there. I think it's why film festivals are so important for features and for shorts. But it's like I think there's room for more stories and more voices. And so I'm happy to be part of that. And I want to put things out in the world that I'm excited to see. I kind of got a few years into my career was like, oh, this is what I'm excited about. I should just say that that's what I'm making. So the misogynistic horror film stopped being sent to me. You know what I mean? Because before I didn't articulate it right away, but it was what I was being drawn to. It was the kind of stories I wanted to put out in the world. And so it matters. And like, it mattered to me before I have a kid, but I have an 8-year-old daughter and I watch what she watches. And like, it's
Right.
gotten so much better. But man, I really grew up having to associate with boy stories.
No, I know. Yeah. I mean, and that just was so unfortunate. But I mean, thankfully now, I mean, you're getting the opportunity to work with, people like Kelly from Sugar Daddy, and I mean, so many other talented people who are creating these really sort of fantastically just layered and nuanced stories that are, female driven. And, at the end of the day, it diversity is fantastic, but if the story sucks, the story sucks. We have to have good stories to get
Yeah.
people back into the theaters. And I mean, this is such a great way to do that. And I mean, just again, I mean, I kind of admire you, to be honest. Like I've been a fan. I mean, when I was looking through all the stuff you produced, I was like, damn, there's some good stuff in here. And I mean, just honestly, keep up the good work. And I mean, and congrats on being in the festival. And thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you and on International Women's Day. Thank you.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thanks. Take
All
care.
right. Bye.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.